Good morning, Mrs. Weeks.
Good morning.
Oh, what's the matter with Mrs. Weeks? I thought she was better.
Well, she's as fit as she'll ever be. I'm discharging her from the hospital.
Oh.
Is that all? I thought she'd been given a life sentence at least.
Yes, well, in a way she has. I've just told her that it's the end of the road. No more drinking for her. Not even a drop to keep the cold out.
She'll need all the help we can give her. It's a pity she's going out so soon.
Yes. I've arranged some sessions for her with Dr. Daly.
Sceptical, Charles?
Well, I know old Georgie.
Thank you.
You honestly believe that a few hours with an overworked psychiatrist is going to help her?
But she's not a true alcoholic, is she?
No. She's shown that she's capable of staying off the stuff for long periods. In here, for instance, she hardly seems to miss it.
Well, prison has no terrors for her. She welcomes the routine and the company.
Exactly. The danger comes when she goes out. So she's got to face up to one fact. If she drinks again, she'll die. Fortunately, there's no room for her on her old wing, so she won't be amongst her cronies. She's being transferred to South Wing, I understand.
Miss Parrish.
What does that mean?
For some reason, old Georgie's always been terrified of her.
I see. South Wing. Now, what would you say if I told you that one of our short-term inmates was found in Oxford Street on a Sunday afternoon with an empty gin bottle in her hand and a row of smashed shop windows behind her?
I'd say old Mrs. Weeks.
I thought you might. This one's about 25, quite well-spoken, and reasonably attractive.
Carol Barris. 2 months drunk and disorderly. And the governor suggests we put her in with Mrs. Weeks.
Malicious damage, resisting arrest.
Well, she got off quite lightly. Apparently the bench were sorry for her. It seems she was rather badly treated by some man.
Well, at least she'll have that in common with 90% of the others.
In you come, Carol.
Carol?
Come on, Carol, quickly.
I'm the assistant governor in charge of this wing, South Wing. Have you been told your rights?
Yes.
Yes, miss.
Yes, miss. Good. Later this morning, you'll have a medical inspection. In the next few days, you'll be seen by the chaplain and Miss Clarke, the senior welfare officer. If you have any problems outside, family, friends, employers, take it up with them.
Yes, miss.
Any problems you find in here, go to Mrs. Spencer or come to me. On a notice board outside, you'll find a summary of the wing routine and the prison regulations. I advise you to memorize them.
Yes, miss.
Very well. Now, you will have been told that with good behaviour, you can earn up to 1/3 remission of your sentence. On this wing, that is very easily done. Obey the regulations, do the work assigned to you quietly and well, and keep your room and yourself tidy. That's all, but I will not accept anything else. As a first offender, I would have preferred to give you a room of your own, but due to the present shortage of accommodation, unfortunately, that will not be possible. Any questions?
No, miss.
Number 12.
Come on.
I know these first few days can be difficult. Think of the regulations and routine as being for your own good. Concentrate on them, and you'll find you adjust quite quickly. Very well, I'll come and see you once you've settled in. Thank you, Mrs. Spencer.
Right, Carol, quickly.
No, of course, madam. We all realise it's the procedure. It's just that in this
You'd
case...
prefer a straight promotion for Mrs. Spencer.
Frankly, yes, I would.
But it's too important appointment. Your deputy, Chief 2, Stone Park. Can't be just an automatic internal promotion.
It has to be open to the whole service, Chief.
Yes, I do realise that, of course. It's just that...
Governor. Oh, just a minute. There's a Mrs. Phillips, principal officer from Durham at the gatehouse. Do you know her?
Ross Phillips? Yes, she was promoted from here about 2 or 3 years ago.
Well, she wants permission to visit. Have her sent up, will you, please?
Well, we all know why she's here.
Yes, I have a list of candidates. She's one of them. Well, what's she like?
Very capable. Very popular with the women.
Chief, you have the uncanniest knack of wrapping up criticism inside a compliment.
Well, I didn't mean to criticise. It's just that I don't think the best officers are necessarily those that go out of their way to be liked by the women.
Sometimes quite the opposite.
And Mrs. Spencer has stood in very satisfactorily as Chief 2 for the past 2 or 3 months, as well as being in charge of the officers on her own wing.
Yes.
And she has been at Stone Park longer than anyone, bar myself. that
Mrs.
is.
Armitage,
And-
it's not merely length of service that has to be taken into account.
Yes, yes, of course, madam.
Well, if you'll excuse me, I have the AG's weekly reports to get through.
Certainly. But don't forget that group of JPs that we're showing around this afternoon.
Don't worry, I won't go to the pub at lunchtime.
Now, Mrs. Weeks, you'll see that the officers in South Wing keep an eye on her, won't you?
Yes, of course, madam. I have a soft spot for old Georgie. Though I'm afraid in her case, the main problem is finding the right place for her to live when she gets out.
Oh, Miss Clarke's dealing with that.
Yes, madam. And I'm not saying it's her fault.
But
Well, Miss Clarke and the other welfare officers haven't been notably successful in the past. Of course, Georgie can be very difficult.
oh, I see.
She's known at all the hostels and the usual homes that take discharged prisoners. They won't have anything more to do with her.
Well, thank you for letting me know. I'll deal with it personally.
Thank you, madam.
Come in.
Good morning, madam.
Ah, you're Mrs. Phillips.
Yes.
Hello, Roz.
Hello, Chief. I hope you don't mind me barging in, but I had a couple of days' leave due, and as I was coming down to London for the board anyway, I thought I'd use the time. Give me a chance to do some shopping and catch up on any new developments of the park.
I don't think you'll find too many changes. There must be still quite a few of the staff here that you know.
I imagine so. Would you object if I took a look around, madam?
Not at all. It's a very sensible idea.
Thank you, madam.
She'll be in number 12 with the new girl, Carol Barris.
Come along, Georgie.
Yes. Did you want to say something, Mrs. Weeks?
Well, I thought I might have a room of my own.
I'm sorry, there isn't one available.
Well, number 7's free.
That is reserved for 2 prisoners being transferred from the county assizes.
Well, could I have it till then? One of them might be took sick.
Sorry, Miss Parrish.
Georgie, we've been through all this before, and you know perfectly well you can't get round me. Now, why not try thinking of somebody else for a change? The girl you'll be with is very quiet, rather frightened. She only arrived today, and somebody like you could help her adjust to being in here.
Can I go on centre cleaning?
I don't make bargains, Georgie.
But you don't understand, miss. Dr. Mays says I'm not at all well. I've got to be looked after.
You were discharged from the hospital wing as fit. In any case, you've been excused work for the next 3 days.
I wouldn't show it in front of her, Miss Bailey, but I'm really not well.
It's a hard life, Georgie.
That's right, old Georgie, always good for a laugh.
It's the best way to be.
Precious little left to laugh at.
Come on, love, it's not like you to be so down. You heard the AG, she's counting on you to cheer up your roommate.
Cheek she's got asking favours. By rights, I ought to be on North Wing. Last thing I wanted was to go on the Parrish.
That's more like it.
Here. What's she like? Have you seen her?
Yes, I fetched her up from Beak Street this morning. Didn't get much out of her, but I don't think she'll give you any trouble. Carol, this is your roommate, Mrs. Weeks. I'm sure you get along fine together. Help her to sort herself out, will you? And take it easy.
Hello? Hello? I'm Mrs. Weeks. You can call me Georgie if you like. Short for Georgina. And you're Carol, aren't you? Oh, buck up, dear. I know it takes a bit of getting used to. But you're here and I'm here, and if we're going to share, we've got to talk. Georgie and Carol, they get along like an house on fire. Here, shall I help you move your things? Put them on the shelf. This one's yours. That where you want them? Oh, don't talk then. I've shared with you before, lots of you snotty-nosed piece. I might have known the moment I come in here, see you, taking the bottom bed, leaving me the top to climb up to at my age. Ought to have had a room of me own. Oh, what's the use? Oh, Georgie, Georgie. Oh, you can laugh then. Well, what's so funny? Oh, well. Best way, I suppose. Yeah. What you want? What we both want's a nice cup of tea.
You can get drinks here.
Wish you could. But you can usually swing a cup of tea if you know the screw's on duty.
I'm sorry, Liz. You'll just have to wait.
Oh, I should have arranged to meet you there.
Oh, if you want to go on.
How long are you going to be?
Well, just until I finish this summary of Mrs. Weeks's medical history. The governor wants it. Toot sweet.
Yes. She even asked to see my file on her this morning.
Bit frazzled, are we?
When I think of the hours I have spent, wasted, trying to find homes for Geordie Weeks.
Well, we've all got to do what we can. Mrs. Armitage locks them up, I patch them up, you set them up when they leave. Or try to.
Try to, that's it, exactly. The ones who most need it are the ones you can't help. It's an endless circle. Cycle. What the hell? I'm going.
No, look, Liz, hang on. I'll only be a couple of minutes. It's just that I promised Susan that she would have this before lunch.
And Susan comes first, of course.
For pity's sake, we're only going to the pub. I thought you'd stopped smoking.
Well, I've started again.
South Wing. Seen so many others since, but this is the first I served on.
Well, they're all pretty much the same.
I suppose so. This is the one I remember. Is Miss Parrish still here?
Oh, she's still AG.
What's she like now?
She doesn't change much. Mellowed a little, like all of us. Well, if you'll excuse me, I'm off home now.
Afternoon off?
No, I usually nip home at this time just to see my husband's all right. He hasn't been too well lately.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Will you show Mrs. Phillips around for me?
Certainly, Chief.
Make sure she doesn't get into any bad company.
See you again, I hope.
Well, is there anything special you'd like to see, Mrs. Phillips?
I'd quite like a word with your principal officer.
Oh, that's Mrs. Spencer. She's over here. Mrs. Spencer?
Ross! Hello, Meg.
Well, you know each other.
Since before you were out of gym slips. Probably before she was even into them. We trained together.
Oh, and there was me thinking that...
What?
Well, that Mrs. Phillips was somebody from the Home Office, being ever so respectful to another screw.
I don't like to hear officers use that word.
I noticed. I don't much care for it either. And if we'd ever dared...
We'd have been jumped onto the proverbial height. Oh, it's good to see you, Meg.
And you. I heard you've been made up to P.O.
Yeah.
Are you still at the Grange?
No, I've been at Durham for the last 3 years.
You've come up for the board.
Yes.
Is your roommate all right? I didn't see her at lunch.
Well, she's not very hungry. You know how it is. That cup of tea you give her, that'll do her till later on.
All right, then.
Mrs. Weeks, stand up straight.
Mrs. B! Mrs. P, it's yourself. Well, I never.
Oh, God, of course you did. You must have to be back inside again.
You nearly got me going. But all that stand to attention, stand easy, it's all gone, you know.
I know.
Here, you haven't been nicked, have you?
Not yet. Still waiting for them to find me out.
Still take a joke, I can see. Coming back here, are you?
Just looked in, Georgie.
Best way, eh?
Well, she certainly hasn't changed. Still in and out? Our most regular customer, poor old thing. She didn't half jump to it there. She must have thought she was back in the old days. Yes. I hear your new governor's quite a stickler for discipline.
Oh, yes, but different, though. More a sort of firmness, reaching an understanding with the women about what's expected.
I've always approved of that.
Have you had your lunch yet?
No. What about you?
Well, I'll be popping up to the canteen when I've seen this lot off to work. Like to join me?
I'd love to. Thank you.
You see? They noticed. I told you they would. If you don't eat, it gets written down, then they start bothering you.
I don't want anything.
Look, you've been on the booze for a few days. I know what you're feeling, especially when it's over and you're not used to it. You need a good hot meal inside you. All right, suit yourself. Only take you longer to get over it. No skin off my nose.
Those of you who caught last week's programme will have noticed that some people are doing weird and wonderful things to their hair these days. They're like the people in the studio today, most of whom look
How do you love?
Who were you expecting, a fancy woman?
She's early here in the morning.
Hello, Ellen.
Hello, Ma.
You're not at the clinic today?
I was only there as part of the course. I told you.
They can't afford it now she's qualified.
What have you been up to, eh?
Well, I played 9 holes of golf and I, watched the box.
Anything good on?
Usual. I was telling our Ellen, now she's not working, she could bring our granddaughter round a bit more often to see us.
Why not?
You won't find it too tiring, Dad?
Of course not. I'd like you to, while you've still got some free time.
Likely to have for the foreseeable future.
I thought they wanted people with your qualifications.
So did I. But with all hospital cutbacks, the last thing they want is extra psychiatric workers.
They need their heads examined.
Ah, well.
Hairdressers are a rip-off.
Cup of tea, Mum.
I'd love some.
Take too much time. Great. Well, the cost of getting your hair done professionally these days has, like most things, gone up and up.
Be a shame if Helen doesn't get something soon. Waste.
Yeah, it will. Hey, guess who looked in today? Ros Phillips. Used to be Ros Sadler.
Oh, I remember.
Down here for the board the day after tomorrow.
Oh, competition from Meg Spencer?
Should think she'll be a front runner. There's going to be a lot of competition.
Still, if your governor favours Meg, it must help.
If only she sticks to it.
Well, I suppose she'll have to go for the best available. Let's face it, governor's loyalty has to be to Stone Park, not just to separate members of the staff.
Well, we'll see.
Have you a minute?
Yes, of course.
It's about the new girl, Parrish, and Mrs. Weeks. I get the impression that you think I'm wrong in suggesting they share.
Frankly,
Yes, of course.
Carol Barris is a young woman who tried to escape from emotional tension in an isolated bout of drinking.
We're not sure it was isolated.
I just feel the shock of being committed to prison would have been enough. But what chance will she have now? With Weeks laughing her out of it, encouraging her, teaching her all the shabby little dodges she's learned from a lifetime in prison.
Up to now, I might have agreed with you. But she's had a very bad shock, and she knows she nearly died. Dr. Mays hopes this might affect her behaviour in the future. Now, in Carol, Mrs. Weeks might see herself as she once was and realise what she's become.
All right, girls, now come along. Settle down.
Night,
Good night, Annie.
Look up, Carol. Soon be lights out. Better start getting undressed. Carol?
Good night, Vera.
Good night, Georgie.
Oh, good night, miss.
What's up with her?
Oh, she's just flaked out. I'll see she gets changed.
All right.
All right, Annie.
come out, have we? Needing our breakfast, are we? Think you can keep it down?
I was so afraid to come out. Everybody knowing about it.
You can stop coming that for a lark.
I don't know what you mean.
Don't you? I was the one lying there listening to you snoring all night.
I'm sorry, Georgie.
Oh, no, you're not. It was a good act, love, but I've seen them all, even if there's some the screws have missed. You're not sorry because you don't remember a thing.
How could I if I was asleep?
Oh, well, have it your own way. Where'd you get it? Do you want me to ask again louder?
How did you know?
Tried all Louises in my time, even thought up some new ones for getting the stuff in.
But how did you know?
Well, you had me scared just laying there. So I got up and had a deco and smelt your breath.
That must have been nice.
What was it?
Hair lotion. Some they let me keep. There's none left.
Don't worry, I wouldn't touch it, not if it were 5-star. Not any of it ever again.
Seen the light?
Oh, look at me, love. I was an old woman before I was 40. It isn't worth it.
I meant to keep some of it. 2 months! I don't know how I'm going to stand it.
You could take the cure.
No! You split on me.
Oh, as if I would. Easy, love. I know what you're feeling. Or almost. Clever dicks.
Who?
Martha Hardnose, Parrish, Dr. Mays, the lot of them. Putting us in here together. Clever. Except they got it all what's it about elbow.
And you let me know the moment you've contacted her. Well, yes, thank you again.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
I didn't expect to see you in so early. Grapevine said you were at it here till quite late with Peter Mays. Ah, yes, perhaps I should have put that in a different way.
Yes, I think perhaps you should. It was very useful last night. Peter helped me go through all the notes and files on Mrs. Weeks. It was depressing reading. Now I can see why so many people have written her off.
Have you turned up something?
A faint possibility. My predecessor found a widow who was prepared to take in difficult ex-prisoners. Apparently, Mrs. Weeks went to stay with her for some time and formed one of the few stable relationships of her life.
Oh, you mean old Mrs. Dobing?
Well, yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, she had to go away. Mrs. Weeks was left on her own too long. Fatal. Do you think Mrs. Dobing might take her back?
Well, so far, no one's been able to get in touch with her. I really don't think welfare put in enough effort.
You don't think you're going there yourself?
No, but I might.
You've spoken to Miss Clarke about it?
Yes. I told her I intended to start by doing what I could for Mrs. Weeks. She seemed perfectly agreeable.
Should have saved some up like you meant to. If you haven't got it, it's no good complaining.
Yeah.
Put it out of your mind. You don't want to wind up like me, do you? 28 years in here, off and on. This place or others like it. 28 years. If I'd stopped when I was your age.
But you didn't, did you? And you won't.
I have to. Last time I nearly kicked off.
Last time?
Something I cooked up for myself.
What?
Stuff you don't want to try.
What was it? Where did you get it?
Nicked it when they was painting the laundry. Miss, little Turk, lemonade.
Really know how to turn it on, don't you?
Here. You want to be careful they don't see you like that.
Hello, Meg. You look a bit tired.
Just nervous.
Not surprising with the board tomorrow. Still, you are on the short list.
Well, that's something, I suppose.
It's a great deal. Mind you, you'll be on your own tomorrow. It's a very strong short list. And even with the governor on the board...
All right, Chief, I understand. I'm not counting on anything. Not till it happens.
Hello, Georgie. How are you getting on with your new cellmate?
Carol, she's nice. I like her. Ever such a sad life she's had.
Isn't she lucky to have you to cheer her up?
I've come
see Carol goes. Oh, right, miss. Yeah, I've just left her. Now, she's not feeling quite herself. Perhaps you'd better see her another time.
Oh, well, we'll let her decide whether she wants to talk to me or not, shall we? It's all right. No need to get up. I'm Miss Clarke, welfare. There are some particulars I'd like to get. And in return, if there's anything troubling you, let me know. I'll try to help. May I? Barras. Do you pronounce it the English or the French way?
English. My grandfather was French.
Now then, you're not married. Parents alive? Both dead. Anyone you'd like contacted? Landlord. Do you have a fiancé? So there's no one.
He wouldn't care. He just wouldn't care.
Who?
He'd laugh. It should be him in here, not me. He shouldn't have left me.
Who are we talking about?
He left me.
Someone you love? Were you living together?
Drinking together. When you drink like that, there's nothing else.
How did you control it when you saw the doctor?
Breathing. Like the exercises you do when you're pregnant.
That's very clever. Did this man start you drinking?
Oh, I thought it was just for parties till I met him. We had a party. Lasted for 4 years.
Tell me about him.
He wouldn't like it.
How could he know? Choose another name for him, if you like. What name would suit him?
Peter.
Fine. Peter, you said? Where did you first meet him?
At a disco. It was lust at first sight.
I'll see you later, love.
Why did you stay with him? Why didn't you just refuse to help him when he did those things?
He was too strong for me.
He actually forced you to go with him?
He didn't have to. I couldn't say no.
All right, Carol, you needn't tell me any more. I'll come and see you again soon. And try not to think about it. It's all over. And just tell yourself you're very lucky indeed that he left you when he did.
Carol, love, what'd she say to you?
Leave me alone.
Carol, what's happened?
I told her a story. A good one. Oh, God. I'll go crazy if I don't get another drink.
Oh, help me. Help me. Look, if I could get you some, not the sort of stuff I made, some real stuff.
Oh, one, just one. Just a swallow to kill the grand.
Oh, Mrs. Spencer.
Yes?
You know the chaplain? Yes. Well, he was so nice to me when I was in hospital visiting me and all that. I wondered if I could nip up and have a word with him.
Well, you ought to have an appointment, Georgie. Well, he might be free. Get that green band to take you up. But if he isn't there,
Mind you come straight back.
Oh, yes.
Elsie!
Can you remember it all?
Every filthy word of it.
You didn't believe her, did you? It's a fairy tale.
For sick-minded adults.
You do realise that if there's any truth in it, if you think there is, then you must report it at once to the governor.
That's why I want to get it all down. A man like that has to be stopped.
Where did you get it? Communion wine. The CFE's very careful. The RC often leaves his cupboard unlocked and his office. Now, we'll have an agreement. You'll stick to it? Get your mug. One nip at a time, and I say when. And I keep the bottle. And if they find it, you took it.
Anything, come on. How many are you having yourself on the side?
Not me, ever.
Stone Park's Alcoholics Anonymous. Another.
Come on now. Fair's fair. Tell us the story you told Miss Clarke.
Eh?
The story you made up.
Who says I made it up?
You didn't tell her all about yourself.
Not all, no. Not all. It's more fun to tell the truth. Pretend you made it up. That way they don't know what to believe. Can't catch you.
Well, come on. Tell us.
It'll make you blush.
That'll be the day.
Turn your little ears pink.
Oh, go on.
The hero of our story, silly bitch, she thought I made up his name. It is Peter. Peter.
I first met Peter at a disco 4 years ago. I went that night to his flat. I never went home again.
Go on, Miss Clarke.
He just lay there looking at me. He thought I was going to shave him with it. By the time he realised Peter had him by his wrist behind his back, he struggled more than I thought he would. He was one of the best.
No, man. An old tramp. You wouldn't do that.
They're the easiest. Nobody cares what happens to them. Be a lot harder, more exciting, if you...
No, I don't want to hear any more.
You have to hear how it ends, Georgie.
You made it up, didn't you? Shouldn't make up things like that.
Drink. Another drink.
I should never have brought it. Pour the rest away.
What's the matter? I'm going to have another drink out of the bottle. You know, you're just like some of those dirty old derelicts. Give me the bottle, Georgie. Or do you fancy fighting for it?
He called me a dirty coward. I just couldn't take any more.
Well, now you've heard it all. What do you think? Is it true, or did she make it up?
It's a tissue of lies. The whole thing sounds like a morbid fantasy.
Yes, well, that's what it would have been dismissed as a couple of years ago, but not today. No, I'm inclined to believe it.
You really believe that this girl was so corrupted by the man that she helped him out in a series of muggings? And when they got fed up with that, they moved on to tramps in condemned buildings and they beat up just for kicks?
Yes.
Well, if it is true, this man's involved her in several muggings and at least 2 killings.
You should have heard her voice. I believed her. Thank God she got away from him.
Well, I agree it's a sickening story, but it...
Yes, but it is possibly true.
Yeah, but there's one thing that doesn't add up. She says that he had a complete hold over her, and that it was disgust that finally made her break away from him.
And yet, she's always claimed that it was he who left her.
I see, thank you. Carol Barris, fighting drunk.
Mrs. Jeffries! Fetch the nurse!
I have to go in that one?
Well, it's your own room, Georgie. What's up?
It's just that it won't feel right.
Go on, Georgie. It's all yours now. On you go.
How is she?
Oh, none the worse for wear.
She'll be on report this morning.
It was Barris made her steal that wine.
Nonetheless, it's a question of discipline. The other inmates must be set an example.
And what example have I set my junior officers? I didn't see what was going on under my nose. I think I ought to withdraw my application for the board.
Why?
Well, it wasn't me that gave Georgie permission to go up to the chaplain's office.
Well, we can hardly assume that everybody that asks to see the chaplain is planning to steal the communion wine.
No, Miss Parrish.
Look, I think we can spare you this morning. I suggest you go home, have a long, relaxing bath, and prepare yourself for this afternoon.
Mrs. Dobing called? Oh, why wasn't she put through? Well, you could have asked her to hold on until you'd found me. Yes, well, never mind. But if she does call again and I'm not here, have her put straight through to Miss Clarke or Mrs. Armitage. Tell her it's urgent and about Mrs. Weeks. Oh, really, isn't that infuriating? The one telephone call I was hoping for.
So all's the way, madam.
Well, if you do speak to her before I get back, explain the situation, will you? And tell her I'd very much like to see her.
Yes, madam. I'll tell Miss Clarke as well.
Thank you.
Susan? Oh, I'm sorry. This concerns you as well, as a matter of fact, Mrs. Armitage. Now, I know that you're in a hurry, but this is about the Barris girl.
Well, I can give you a couple of minutes.
It's pretty clear now that she is an alcoholic.
And we deliberately put her in with Mrs. Weeks.
Who was the one person she couldn't hide it from. By the way, I've sent Georgie back on the wing. There's no concussion, and she didn't touch a drop.
And what about Carol Barris?
Well, I'm drying her out, but I let the CID have a few minutes with her, and they've added quite a few details to her story.
Did they believe it?
At first, she tried to deny the whole thing, but yes, apparently some of the details do check out. There's one thing. I'd be prepared to bet that she was the prime mover, getting her kicks by urging the man on, until finally it sickened him, which is why he left her. And without him, she was lost.
She must be completely unbalanced.
Yes, I'd be prepared to bet on that as well.
Mrs. Weeks? Sit down. I hear Mr. Radley awarded you 3 days' loss of pay. I'd say that was fairly cheap for a bottle of wine. I've also been told that you want a change of room.
No, miss, not really.
You needn't be afraid to tell me, Georgie.
Miss, she's still here.
Oh, nonsense.
Miss, the things she said.
She's a very unhappy girl and far from well, and I want you to forget all about her. And you have my word, you won't see her again.
Yes, miss.
You've always liked a room of your own, haven't you?
Yes, miss.
Well, now you've got one. It's yours until you leave.
Oh, do you know if they found somewhere outside for me to go?
Miss Clarke would know about that. I'll have a word with her.
And is Mrs. Spencer about? I wanted to see her to wish her luck.
Too late, I'm afraid. She's already gone.
And that is an accurate summary of your experience to date, Mrs. Spencer.
Yes, sir. One more question, Mrs. Spencer. How would you feel about giving orders to officers who'd been your colleagues before?
But surely they'd still be my colleagues, madam. I mean, it has happened before, when I was made principal officer.
Yes. And you would be able to maintain good relations with your present chief officer?
Oh, yes, madam. In fact, it was Mrs. Armitage who first suggested I applied. I mean, to be considered for the appointment.
Mrs. Marshall?
Well, our senior PO, Mrs. Spencer, has stood in as deputy chief on several occasions.
Yes, well, I think we've kept Mrs. Spencer in the hot seat quite long enough. I have no further questions, Mrs. Ross?
No, thank
Mrs.
you.
Marshall?
No.
Thank you, Mrs. Spencer.
Thank you, sir.
That woman the governor's been looking for, she's no use to Mrs. Weeks. I tried to get her. She's moved to a cottage somewhere in Norfolk to look after a sick sister. End of story.
Well, the police are grateful to you for leading them to Carol Barris.
I don't want their thanks.
Why not?
I don't wish to be associated with that side.
You can't work for the prison service and disassociate yourself from other branches of the law. How did you get her to talk? Sympathetic manner, tone of voice? You know your job.
Which I need to keep proving.
I wasn't implying anything like
No,
that.
well, that's the impression I keep getting wherever I go. Either that I'm slacking or letting my personal relations interfere with my judgment.
Me too. Except in my case, it's a lack of personal relations. Let's face it, Liz. It is pretty well over between us. Whatever it was.
I'd like to think it wasn't. But I suppose it has been for some time. I've kept hoping something would happen and we'd be able to relax with each other.
We need a cooling off period where we don't feel we have to make the effort. Just see each other at work.
I'll still come to you for advice.
You might even start taking it.
I'll miss you.
Mrs. Rosamond Phillips, please sit down.
Thank you, sir.
You probably all know each other, but this is Mrs. Ross, Deputy Director for Women's Prisons.
Madam?
And Mrs. Marshall, Governor of Stone Park.
Madam.
I'm Hastings, the establishment officer. I think we'll take your experience and qualifications as read for the moment. Mrs. Ross?
Mrs. Phillips, Chief Officer 2 in an establishment as large as Stone Park is an extremely responsible and arduous position. Many with the qualifications wouldn't think of applying. Do you really want this appointment?
Yes, madam.
Why?
Because I believe that eventually I make a good chief officer. An experience as deputy chief in an establishment like Stone Park could only help to develop any potential I may have.
Or reveal its absence.
I suppose so, madam.
Thank you, Mrs. Phillips.
Mrs. Ross's last question didn't upset you, Mrs. Phillips?
No, not at all, sir.
Obviously, you believe you have the necessary potential, or you wouldn't be here, would you?
Stone Park, as you know, is a security prison. May I ask, what is your attitude to discipline?
It has changed over the years, madam. But fundamentally, I believe in a certain firmness. Otherwise, the women have no sense of being part of a controlled environment. But it should be directed as much as possible towards self-control. And we should try to reach an understanding with the women of what is expected of them.
Dad? Dad?
Hello. Where's Sammy?
You're the kids next door. They were at the park.
Oh, that's nice.
All right? Dad, could you switch that thing off for a few minutes?
Just getting interesting.
I want to talk to you.
Sometimes you sound just like your mother.
Thanks.
It's all right. It's from a book. You can go out and buy it for me.
Oh, Dad, be serious. Mum didn't talk to you at all, did she? About me?
What about you, love?
Well, I've been offered part-time work as a psychiatric social worker at Stone Park.
Ooh.
I said I'd love to. I mean, it could be really exciting. But...
What?
Oh, I don't know. With Mum there as chief officer.
Oh, well, I gave up making decisions for you on your 16th birthday. But one thing I will say. I can't think of anything that would give your mother more pride than having you working with her at Stone Park.
This is worse than being one of the candidates.
Well, you should know, Chief. You've been through it in your time.
So long ago I've forgotten. I'm telling a lie. I do remember, and it was sheer hell.
Oh, hallelujah!
You still here? Thank you, Charles. Oh.
They took a while to make their minds up, then.
Well, the board finished a couple of hours ago, but I took the opportunity of going over one or two things with the Deputy Director since I was at the Home Office. Did Mrs. Dobing call?
No, madam, she didn't call back.
And the appointment?
No, I can't discuss it, Charles.
Well, would it be completely against the regulations, madam, to just give us some idea how Mrs. Spencer got on? Well, just a little hint.
Nothing's been settled yet.
I admit that I've failed to find anywhere for Mrs. Weeks, but it's not for want of trying. I suppose I feel guilty because I've been through it so often with her before. I have not tried on this occasion as hard as I might. And I suppose I resented what I thought of as...
Interference by an amateur.
Well,
Come in.
Excuse me, madam. Your Mrs. Dobing has just arrived at the gatehouse asking for me. I thought you'd like to see her. She's on her way up.
Well, show her in, Mrs. Armitage.
And I should have told you about Mrs. Dobing moving to Norfolk to look after her sister.
But I knew. It was in the files. Sometimes it's worth turning the stones over twice.
This way, Mrs. Dobing.
Ah, Mrs. Dobing. I'm Mrs. Marshall.
Oh, how do you do? Oh, you're not the one I spoke to.
Oh, that would be my secretary.
No, about 2 years back.
Oh, Mrs. Boswell?
Yes, madam.
Very nicely spoken.
Do sit down, Mrs. Dobing. Thank you, Mrs. Armitage.
Oh, it's nice. I like a nice colour scheme.
I'm very grateful to you for coming to see me. I meant to come to you.
Oh, it's good for me to have to make the effort. I don't go far these days because of my hip. But I was so worried.
We thought you were somewhere in Norfolk with your sister.
Yeah. Well, I was, see. When I broke my hip, she insisted on me going to stay with her. It was very quiet.
I thought it was she who was ill.
Oh, she's always been like that. Then, unfortunately, about, 6 months ago, she died.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Blessed release, really. Of course, then I come back to London.
We've been trying to contact you.
Yeah. Well, I had the phone cut off when I went. Then when I come back, you know, didn't seem worth having it put back on again. Nobody called. Most days I spend with a neighbour up the street. But when I heard something had happened to Mrs. Weeks, what is it?
She's getting out in a fortnight.
Getting out?
Well, didn't you know she was here?
Oh, she just disappeared. I mean, I never thought. Of course, that other governor told me she could be difficult, but I never saw no sign.
You got on well together.
Oh, the best of company. So, she's not in any trouble, then?
No, but she could be, unless she has the right place to go when she's released.
I've just come to fetch old Georgie up to the governor's office. Look, I'm sorry about that board, Meg.
Oh, I don't mind, really. And if it had to be anyone from outside, there's no one I'd rather it was than Ros Phillips.
There you are. I knew you'd say that.
Oh, I mean it. Oh, I could do the work. Truthfully, though, I'm nervous of that kind of responsibility. Ros isn't.
I'm not leaving. They'll have to knock off remission now.
Oh, Georgie.
They can't make me go out.
Georgie, what are you thinking of? This won't do.
I'm not going out.
Look, do you trust me? I mean it. Do you trust me? I want you to come with me up to the governor's office. There's somebody waiting there to see you. Now come along, just you and me.
What about all this, Chief?
Any good at housework?
Come in.
Mrs. Dobing.
Hello, Mrs. Weeks.
Oh, Mrs. Dobing.